The mysterious discovery. It was a quiet day in the vast reaches of the galaxy. The crew of the starship Vanguard drifted through the empty space, their sensors scanning the stars for anything out of the ordinary. Captain Aidan Blackstone sat in the command chair, his eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. For days now, they had been on a routine patrol, but today something caught their attention. Something strange. "Captain," said Lieutenant Callie Martinez, her voice breaking the silence, "I'm picking up something unusual. A faint signal coming from an uncharted sector." Aidan's eyebrows furrowed. "Uncharted? Are you sure? That area's been mapped 100 times. Callie didn't reply immediately. Instead, her fingers flew over the controls, adjusting the settings to narrow down the signal. "It's weak, but it's definitely there. I can't get a clear reading yet, but it doesn't match anything we've encountered." Aidan stood up, crossing the bridge and peering over Callie's shoulder. His gut told him something wasn't right, but he didn't want to jump to conclusions. The galaxy was full of mysteries, and not all of them were dangerous. But this felt different. "Plot a course to that sector," he ordered. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The Vanguard shifted course, its sleek engines humming as the ship adjusted its path. The crew could feel the change in the ship's movements, a slight lurch as they made their way toward the unknown. As they neared the source of the signal, Aidan felt a growing sense of unease. They were entering a part of space that had long been ignored, an area where no ships traveled, where no one knew what lay beyond the stars. The closer they got, the stranger the signal became. It was like a whisper in the dark, impossible to trace but undeniable. As the Vanguard approached the coordinates, the signal suddenly stopped, vanishing without a trace. "What the hell?" Callie muttered, staring at the empty screen. Aidan clenched his fists. "Did we lose it?" "Not exactly," she replied, her voice tense. "It's like it's just gone, but the coordinates are still there. I'm not sure what we're dealing with, Captain." Aidan paced the room, deep in thought. He knew they were on the edge of something significant, something that couldn't be ignored. There was no telling what lay ahead. "Prepare a shuttle. We're going down there to investigate." The crew got to work quickly, preparing the shuttle for departure. Aidan felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. He was the captain, responsible for the lives of everyone aboard. But his curiosity was getting the better of him. Something about this felt different. There was more to this signal than anyone could understand, and Aidan was determined to find out what. Soon, the shuttle was ready. Aidan, Callie, and a small crew of specialists boarded the craft. The Vanguard watched from orbit as the shuttle descended toward the planet below. The planet was dark, its surface covered in deep forests and towering mountains. There was no sign of any civilization, no obvious markers of intelligent life. It was a world untouched by the civilizations of the galaxy. As the shuttle descended through the atmosphere, Aidan's nerves were on edge. The silence around them seemed unnerving. The sensors weren't picking up anything unusual, just the typical signs of an unexplored planet. Yet, deep down, he knew something wasn't right. The shuttle touched down in a clearing, the thrusters hissing as they slowly powered down. Aidan was the first to exit, stepping out onto the soft, wet ground. The air was thick with moisture, and the distant sound of unknown creatures echoed through the trees. He felt like an intruder on a world that had been forgotten by time. "Stay close," Aidan ordered, his voice steady but commanding. The team followed closely, their footsteps muffled by the thick grass. They had only been on the planet's surface for a few minutes when they stumbled upon something truly strange. A massive stone structure stood before them, half buried in the earth. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, alien in design, yet strangely familiar. The structure seemed ancient, weathered by time, and hidden away in this forgotten part of space. The stone pillars were covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. Aidan's heart raced as he stepped closer. This was no ordinary structure. It was something far older, something that had been left behind for a reason. "Captain," Callie's voice broke through his thoughts. "Look at this." She had found something even more peculiar. A large stone tablet lay in front of the structure, half obscured by dirt and debris. The symbols carved into it were intricate and detailed, unlike anything Aiden had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with an energy that was both ancient and powerful. Aiden knelt down, brushing away the dirt to reveal the full tablet. As his fingers brushed against the symbols, a surge of energy coursed through him. It was subtle but unmistakable. The tablet hummed with a life of its own. This is incredible," Callie whispered. "These symbols are like nothing we've ever encountered. I think they're older than anything in Federation records." Aiden felt a cold chill run down his spine. This wasn't just a discovery. This was a message left by someone or something long gone, a message that had been waiting for someone to find it. He stood up, his mind racing. There was no turning back now. They had stumbled upon something that could change everything. The mysteries of the galaxy were about to be unveiled, and humanity had no idea what they were about to face. As the team continued to examine the structure, a strange thought crossed Aiden's mind. Had they truly understood the galaxy all along? Had they missed something so significant that it could change the course of their future? In that moment, Aiden realized that they weren't just explorers. They were uncovering something far darker, something that had been hidden from them, deliberately. And now, they would have to face the truth, the hidden secrets. The days that followed the mysterious discovery were filled with tension. The crew aboard the Vanguard remained in orbit around the planet, carefully analyzing every piece of information they could gather about the ancient stone structure. Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something far bigger than just a forgotten ruin. It was as though the structure had been waiting for them, calling them to it from across the stars. Aiden sat in his quarters, staring at the holographic map of the planet and the strange symbols they had uncovered. Every analysis report only deepened his concern. It wasn't just an ancient civilization. They had discovered technology that no species in the galaxy was currently capable of producing. The more Aiden looked at the data, the more he felt a sense of unease settling in his stomach. This was far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Callie Martinez, interrupting his thoughts. "You need to see this." Aiden stood up quickly, his mind racing. He followed Callie down the narrow hallways of the Vanguard to the science lab. Inside, the crew was huddled around a holographic display, examining the tablet they had found on the surface. As Callie activated the controls, the symbols on the stone tablet flickered to life, glowing a bright blue. "We've been analyzing the energy signature of this tablet," Callie explained, "and we've made a disturbing discovery. It's not just an artifact. This tablet is emitting a frequency that is actively trying to communicate with us." Aiden stared at the glowing symbols, his brow furrowed. "Communicate with us? But how? The technology here is centuries, maybe even millennia, old." "We don't know," Callie admitted, "but we've been able to decipher part of the message. It's not what we expected." Aiden leaned in closer, watching as the symbols shifted and rearranged before his eyes. They weren't just random markings. They were forming coherent patterns, like a language. As the symbols shifted, a sudden realization struck him. This was a message, a warning, not meant for anyone but humanity. The symbols blinked and pulsed, and slowly, a translation appeared on the screen. "The worst is yet to come. You have awoken us. The galaxy will not forgive you." A cold shiver ran down Aiden's spine. "What does this mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think it means we've made a mistake," Callie said, her voice filled with dread. "Whatever we've awakened, it's not a peaceful force. This isn't just a message. It's a curse. We've opened a door that was meant to stay shut." Aiden's mind raced as the implications sank in. They hadn't just found a relic. They had uncovered something that could potentially bring disaster to the galaxy. Humanity, for all its strength and ambition, had unknowingly triggered something far more dangerous than they could ever imagine. As the crew continued their analysis, Aiden felt a weight pressing on him. He was responsible for the lives of his crew and the future of humanity. The decision he made now would affect not just them, but the entire galaxy. "We need to get this information to the Federation," Aiden said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "This is bigger than us now." But even as he said the words, a part of him feared that it might already be too late. What if the message was already on its way? What if the forces they had unleashed were already moving toward them, ready to exact their revenge? Callie looked at him, her expression grim. "Captain, we've made enemies just by finding this. But now that we've translated part of the message, we've probably made things worse." Aiden didn't respond right away. Instead, he turned and stared out of the observation window at the vast emptiness of space. There were countless stars out there, countless civilizations, and yet all it took was one discovery, one mistake, to change the course of history forever. The galaxy, once a place of infinite possibilities, now seemed darker, and Aiden couldn't help but wonder what kind of power they had uncovered in the ruins of that ancient structure. Was it a weapon? A force capable of altering the balance of power? Or something even worse, something that could erase humanity from existence? As the Vanguard began its journey back to the planet's surface, Aiden knew that there was no turning back. The discovery was only the beginning. Whatever came next, they would have to face it head-on. And he had a sinking feeling that the galaxy's darkest secrets were only just beginning to reveal themselves. The unseen force. The Vanguard descended through the thick atmosphere of the unknown planet, a shroud of clouds swirling beneath them like a storm eager to consume them. The crew was tense, every eye fixed on the viewport, where the ancient structure loomed ominously on the surface below. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The warning message they had decoded still hung heavy in their minds, a dark reminder of what they had unknowingly triggered. Aiden stood at the front of the command deck, his hands clasped behind his back. His expression was unreadable, but his thoughts were racing. The message had been clear. Humanity had awakened something. But what? And more importantly, who would come for them? It was a question he could not answer. "Captain, we've arrived at the coordinates," said Lieutenant Callie Martinez from the navigation console. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it, one that reflected the uncertainty and fear that had spread through the crew. "Understood," Aiden replied. He turned to the crew. "Prepare for landing. Everyone stay alert. We don't know what's down there, but whatever it is, we'll face it together." The Vanguard touched down with a soft jolt, the shuttle's engines humming in a low, steady rhythm. Aiden could hear the mechanical sounds of the ship's hull settling into the soil beneath them. The crew began preparing to leave the ship, equipping their suits and weapons, their faces grim with the knowledge that this mission had already taken a turn for the worse. Aiden stepped off the ship first, the air outside cool but heavy with a strange, almost metallic scent. The ground was covered in dense, rocky terrain, and the structure ahead was even more imposing up close. It was larger than they had initially realized. An ancient, monolithic pyramid made of an alloy unlike anything they had ever seen. The surface shimmered in the dim light, as if it were alive, pulsing with a faint, eerie glow. "Captain, we've detected an energy surge," said Chief Engineer Thompson, his voice crackling over the comms. "Something inside the structure is reacting to our presence." Aiden's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the structure knew they were there, waiting for them to make the first move. He signaled for the team to advance, but his senses were on high alert, every instinct screaming that something was off. As they approached the entrance, the ground beneath their feet began to hum, a deep vibration that seemed to come from the planet itself. The doors to the structure, previously sealed shut, now began to open slowly, revealing a dark, cavernous interior. The air around them felt heavier, as though the very atmosphere had changed in the presence of the structure. "Stay close," Aiden ordered, his voice firm. We don't know what we're walking into. The team moved inside, their flashlights illuminating the walls, which were lined with more strange symbols. The same symbols that had appeared on the tablet earlier now seemed to be alive, glowing softly along the edges of the walls, pulsating in rhythm with the strange hum. A sense of dread crept over Aiden as they ventured deeper, every step feeling like a descent into the unknown. Suddenly, the hum grew louder, and the temperature dropped sharply. It felt as though the very air around them had thickened, pressing in from all sides. And then they heard it, a low, guttural growl, echoing through the cavernous halls. It wasn't a sound that came from any living creature they had encountered. It was something else, something far older, far more terrifying. The crew froze, their weapons at the ready, eyes scanning the shadows. Aiden's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Was this the result of their meddling with the structure, or was something else at play here? What kind of force could generate such a noise, and what did it mean for their survival? Before he could process the thought, a shape moved in the darkness, a shadow so dark it seemed to swallow the light from their flashlights. It was humanoid, but there was something wrong about it. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, as if it were being controlled by some unseen force. "Stay alert," Aiden shouted, his voice rising above the growing hum. "Don't let it get close." But it was too late. The shadow lunged, its form shifting and distorting as it closed the gap between them in an instant. The crew fired their weapons, but the creature's skin seemed to absorb the blasts, rendering them ineffective. It was like nothing they had ever encountered, a creature from the deepest, darkest corners of the galaxy, born of something ancient and powerful. Aiden and his crew fought valiantly, but the creature was too strong, too fast. The walls around them seemed to shift and move, as if the very structure itself was alive, twisting and contorting in response to the threat. The team was being overwhelmed, their efforts to push back the creature failing. In the chaos, Aiden caught a glimpse of something in the distance, a pair of glowing red eyes, watching from the shadows. It wasn't just one creature. There were more, many more. "Fall back," Aiden ordered, his heart racing. "We need to regroup." The crew turned and fled, their boots pounding against the hard ground as they retreated to the entrance. But even as they ran, the sense of impending doom hung over them like a dark cloud. Whatever force they had awakened in this ancient structure was not just an enemy. It was a nightmare that was now hunting them. As they emerged into the light of day, the doors of the structure slammed shut behind them, trapping whatever horrors lay inside. But Aiden knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The galaxy's darkest secrets were still waiting to be uncovered, and humanity had unknowingly opened the door. The descent into darkness. The crew of the Vanguard gathered in the ship's command room, their faces pale and weary from their harrowing experience on the planet's surface. They were seated around the central table, the hum of the ship's engines the only sound filling the room. No one spoke. The encounter with the dark, monstrous entity inside the ancient structure had left them all shaken, their minds racing with questions that had no answers. Aiden stood at the front, his hands clenched into fists as he stared at the holographic display in front of him. The structure, once so imposing and mysterious, now felt like a prison. The messages they had discovered, symbols that had been etched into the walls, seemed to hint at something far darker than they had anticipated. The messages, once thought to be warnings, had now revealed the chilling truth. Humanity had unknowingly disturbed a power far beyond their comprehension. "We barely escaped with our lives," Lieutenant Martinez spoke first, her voice steady but filled with frustration. "But we don't know what we're up against. What if this force is still out there, waiting for us?" Aiden turned to face her. His gaze was sharp, but there was an unease behind his eyes. "We can't afford to be scared. Whatever we encountered, it's not the end. We've stirred something that won't be silenced until it's finished." The room fell into silence again. Every crew member had their own fears, their own questions. They had seen a force they could not explain, and they knew they couldn't ignore it. Aiden had given them orders to fall back, but they all understood this was no longer just a simple mission. They had entered a new chapter of existence, one where the rules of the galaxy no longer seemed to apply. "Captain," Chief Engineer Thompson said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I've been running scans. I think the structure is still active. There's something beneath it, something alive." The words hit like a cold wave, spreading fear through the crew. Aiden's hand tightened on the edge of the table, but he did not falter. "What do you mean alive?" "It's hard to explain, sir," Thompson continued. "The scans show a massive energy source beneath the surface. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. Unpredictable, almost sentient. It might be the source of those creatures, the ones we encountered. But it's not just that. There's something more, something ancient, and it's moving." Aiden's mind raced. If the entity they had encountered was connected to the energy beneath the structure, then the real danger hadn't even revealed itself yet. It was only a matter of time before whatever force lay beneath would make its way to them. "We'd have to go back," Aiden said with determination, meeting the eyes of each crew member. "We need to find out what's beneath that structure before it reaches us." The crew looked at each other, their faces showing fear, but also determination. They knew this was no longer just about completing a mission. It was about survival. The galaxy's darkest secret had been awakened, and it would stop at nothing to consume them. The Vanguard once again touched down on the planet's surface, this time in a different location, closer to the heart of the structure. The crew moved out, each of them wearing a mask of resolve, even though their hearts were heavy with the uncertainty of what awaited them. The atmosphere around them felt thicker now, as if the very air was growing heavier with each step they took. The ground beneath them rumbled once more, a low, ominous growl that echoed through the stillness. It was as if the planet itself was warning them to turn back. But Aiden and his crew pressed on, guided by the beacon of the ancient structure. As they approached the base of the pyramid, the air seemed to shimmer with an unnatural energy. The symbols on the walls flickered as though alive, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The ground trembled underfoot, and the hum from within the structure grew louder, now accompanied by a distant, ghostly whisper that none of them could quite understand. The words seemed to twist and distort in their minds, like a voice that wasn't meant to be heard by human ears. "Do you hear that?" whispered Lieutenant Martinez, her voice barely audible over the hum. "It's like voices." Aiden's throat tightened. He didn't need to hear the whispers to know that they were not alone. The sense of dread was suffocating, a dark presence watching their every move. And yet, they pressed forward. There was no turning back now. They entered the structure once again, but this time, it felt different. The walls seemed to close in on them, the air thick with an oppressive weight. The crew moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the stillness as they descended deeper into the pyramid's heart. The deeper they went, the more it felt as though they were heading straight into the bowels of hell itself. And then they found it. A massive chamber lay before them, filled with an unearthly glow. In the center of the room stood a colossal, pulsating core, its energy thrumming with raw, untapped power. The symbols on the walls were now clear, their meaning decipherable. A warning, yes, but also an invitation. The core, they realized, was not just a source of power. It was a living entity, an ancient force that had been dormant for eons, waiting for something, or someone, to awaken it. As Aiden stepped forward, the air crackled with energy. His crew could feel it too, an unsettling tension that gripped their chests. This was the force they had disturbed, the one that had waited for them to find it. And now that they had, there was no turning back. The glowing core pulsed once more, brighter than before. And then, as if in response to their presence, it began to speak. "Welcome," the voice echoed, not through their ears, but through their minds. "I have waited long for this moment." Aiden froze. This was no longer just a discovery. It was a reckoning. The awakening. The voice that echoed in their minds was not what any of them had expected. It wasn't just a sound. It was a presence. It filled their heads, their hearts, and their very souls, as if it were not simply communicating, but reaching into the deepest parts of their being. The crew felt a cold shiver race down their spines, yet they stood frozen, captivated by the ancient words. Who are you? Aiden asked, his voice steady, but filled with awe and fear. He had spoken aloud, but he wasn't sure if he had truly uttered the words. The voice had been inside his mind, not his ears. It didn't need the sound to communicate. The glowing core pulsed again, and the voice responded, each word sending tremors through the crew's bodies. I am the end of time, the darkness that consumes all. I have been waiting for you to awaken me. You, the children of the stars, so eager to unravel the secrets of the universe. But some things were never meant to be known. Aiden's eyes widened as the truth began to dawn on him. This wasn't just some forgotten relic of a lost civilization. No, this was something far more terrifying. The entity before them was not simply ancient. It was eternal. It had waited for them, the explorers, to make the fateful decision to uncover its existence. It's alive, whispered Lieutenant Martinez. This thing, it's been here all along, waiting for us. Aiden didn't reply. His mind was racing. They had made a grave mistake. They had thought themselves capable of uncovering the mysteries of the universe, believing they could control the unknown. But now, they were confronted with something far beyond their understanding. An intelligence older than any race in the galaxy and infinitely more dangerous. The core's pulsing light dimmed slightly, and then flared once more, casting long shadows across the chamber. The whispers returned, growing louder, swirling around them like a storm. The air felt thick and suffocating, and Aiden could feel the weight of something terrible pressing against his chest. The voice spoke again, its tone now filled with malice. You seek power, you seek knowledge, but what you find will be your undoing. You think you have control. You think you are masters of your fate, but you are nothing. Nothing but a fleeting moment in the grand design of the universe. Aiden clenched his fists, trying to push back the rising sense of helplessness. He couldn't let this force win. Not now. Not after everything they had endured. But the core was right. He had no power over it. No one did. What do you want from us? Aiden's voice cracked with desperation. His question hung in the air, unanswered for a moment that stretched into eternity. And then the voice spoke again, but this time the words were chilling in their clarity. I want nothing from you, but you will serve me. You have awakened me. Now you will bear witness to the destruction of all that you hold dear. The ground beneath them trembled again, harder this time, and the walls of the chamber began to shake. The core's light grew brighter, a fierce energy that felt like it could consume them all. The crew instinctively took a step back, but Aiden held his ground. His crew may have been scared, but he would not be. They had come too far to turn back now. We won't serve you, Aiden said, his voice defiant. We'll stop you. We'll fight to the last breath, if we have to. A cold laugh echoed through the chamber, not from the core, but from something deeper, something older. You do not understand. Your struggle is futile. I am the eternal darkness that consumes all, the end that waits for every beginning. You will serve me, whether you choose to or not. Suddenly, the floor beneath their feet cracked open, and a wave of dark energy surged outward, knocking the crew off their feet. Aiden was thrown to the ground, his vision spinning as the world around him seemed to warp and distort. The energy was unlike anything he had ever felt, dark and consuming, twisting his mind, his body, his very soul. Through the chaos, Aiden struggled to rise, his body screaming in pain, but his resolve was stronger than ever. They had to stop this. They had to find a way to destroy the core before it could carry out its promise of destruction. But how? They had no weapons capable of defeating this entity, no knowledge of how to fight something so ancient, so powerful. And then, as the energy began to pulse again, Aiden saw something. A crack in the core's surface, a glimmer of light that was different from the pulsating glow. It wasn't the same dark energy, it was something else. Without thinking, Aiden scrambled toward it, his heart pounding. He had no idea if this would work, but it was their only hope. The crew struggled to follow, but the energy was too overwhelming. Aiden reached the core, his hands trembling as he touched the crack. There was no turning back now. The moment his hand made contact, the chamber went still. For a brief moment, there was silence, a strange, heavy silence that pressed down on them. Then the core shuddered violently, and the light flared with a blinding intensity, forcing Aiden to shield his eyes. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing: the universe would never be the same again. The collapse. Aiden's hands still trembled from the touch of the core. He could feel the heat radiating from it, but there was something else, something darker. It was as if the core had shifted, responded to his touch in a way he could not understand. The air around them was still heavy with that suffocating energy, but now it seemed unstable, like a storm about to break. He looked around at his crew. They were all on their knees, gasping for breath, trying to recover from the overwhelming energy that had poured through the chamber. Lieutenant Martinez was the first to rise, his eyes wide with confusion. "Aiden," he gasped, his voice strained. "What did you do? What's happening?" Before Aiden could answer, the core flared again, brighter than ever. The crack he had touched seemed to widen, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. It was as if the entire structure was coming apart at the seams. The walls cracked and groaned, and in the distance a loud rumble echoed, as though the very foundations of the planet were shaking. "It's falling apart," Aiden muttered, his heart sinking. He had hoped to stop it, to contain the power of the core, but now he feared it was too late. The entity had been awakened, and whatever it was planning, it was unstoppable. The final revelation. The stars outside the window of the ship seemed distant now, as if the galaxy itself had grown silent, waiting for something. Aiden sat alone in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the vast emptiness ahead. The memory of the destruction they had narrowly escaped haunted him. The core, the energy, whatever it was still out there, and it was only a matter of time before it would come for them again. "We're headed to the coordinates." Lieutenant Martinez's voice broke through the silence, sounding shaky but determined. Aiden didn't respond immediately. He had seen the look in the other's eyes when they left the collapsing facility behind. Fear, uncertainty, but also a flicker of hope. Hope that they could stop it. Hope that they could make a difference. "We'll get to the heart of this, Aiden," Martinez continued, his tone more confident now. "We'll figure out what that thing is and destroy it." Aiden's grip tightened on the controls as the ship sliced through the void. But deep inside, he knew they were heading into the unknown. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about uncovering the truth, a truth that, if left alone, could tear the galaxy apart. And if they couldn't stop it, humanity itself would be the one to pay the price. Minutes stretched into hours as the ship continued on its path toward the unknown. Aiden couldn't help but replay everything that had happened. How the core had called to him, how it had responded to his touch, the strange sense of power it held, and the chaos that followed. It was almost as if they had stumbled upon something ancient, something beyond their comprehension. But what was it? And why had it been dormant for so long? The stars began to shift in their view, guiding them to an uncharted planet. The coordinates they had received were clear, and the planet's surface looked normal, almost too normal. The absence of any signs of civilization, any indication of life, gave the place an eerie, desolate quality. Aiden's pulse quickened. They had arrived. "This is it," he said, turning to his crew. "Prepare yourselves. We're going down." As the ship descended toward the planet's surface, The atmosphere thickened. A strange mist clung to the landscape, swirling around them like a living thing. The moment the ship touched down, Aiden could feel the energy in the air. It was different from before. He wasn't sure how to describe it, but it was as if the very ground was alive with anticipation, waiting for them to make the next move. "Stay sharp," Aiden ordered, his voice calm but with an edge of urgency. "We don't know what we're walking into." The crew gathered their equipment and exited the ship, stepping onto the planet's surface. The landscape was eerily quiet, the mist swirling around their legs like ghostly tendrils. Aiden couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though there was no sign of movement anywhere. "Where is it?" Martins asked, his voice echoing in the stillness. "What are we looking for?" Aiden didn't have an answer, but he had a feeling that the planet itself was the answer. They had arrived, but now they had to uncover the truth, what was hiding beneath the surface. They moved cautiously, their steps muffled by the soft earth. As they advanced, they stumbled upon something that made their blood run cold. A massive structure, half buried in the ground, covered in strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the mist. It was the same energy that had surrounded the core back on the facility, the same power that had nearly destroyed them all. "This is it," Aiden whispered. "This is what we've been looking for." The structure loomed before them, ancient and forgotten, like a tomb waiting to be disturbed. The symbols on its surface pulsed with an eerie rhythm, as if it were alive, waiting for them to unlock its secrets. Aiden stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew this was it, the moment of truth. They had discovered the source of the energy, the force that had nearly torn apart everything they knew. But it wasn't just a core, it was something more. The ground beneath their feet trembled again, and the mist swirled violently around them, as if the planet itself was reacting to their presence. Aiden raised his hand, signaling for everyone to stop. They were too close now, and he could feel the energy growing stronger. Then, from deep within the structure, a low rumble echoed, reverberating through the ground beneath them. Aiden felt a cold chill run down his spine. The truth they had been searching for was finally within reach, but they were not prepared for what came next. The ground cracked open, and a massive figure emerged from the depths, a towering humanoid being made entirely of energy and light. Its form shimmered and shifted, its face indistinguishable, as if it was constantly changing. "You have awakened me," the being's voice boomed, a sound like 1,000 whispers blending into one. "And now you must face the consequences." Aiden's crew stood frozen in shock, but Aiden's mind was racing. They had discovered the truth, but it was not what they expected. This being, this entity, was not something they could destroy. It was a force beyond anything they could understand. A being that had been dormant for eons, waiting for the moment when someone would finally awaken it. And now, that moment had arrived. The entity raised its hand, and the ground trembled once more. "You will learn the price of your curiosity," it said. "And you will learn that the truth is often more dangerous than you can ever imagine." Aiden knew the fight for survival was far from over. The entity was more powerful than anything they had ever faced, and if they didn't find a way to stop it, the entire galaxy would fall under its control. But as the entity's energy pulsed around them, he realized one thing. He would do whatever it took to stop this, no matter the cost. As the battle for the galaxy's future began, Aiden and his crew would face their greatest challenge yet, but they weren't ready to give up. Not yet.